starting really with the collapse of the Cold War in 1989. I think we're all old enough to remember those days. I've taught in a few classes where I had to talk about the mid 90s as if it was ancient, the Pleistocene era. Um, but in 1991, 92, there were all these transitions happening, and there was a lot of support coming in from the West on how to, build democratic institutions, write new constitutions, or even build market economies. But what I was particularly interested in, how did these citizens of these states deal with the legacy of what decades of repression did to them, or to be a victim, or collaboration, or human rights violations? Um, how do they really deal with the emotional, psychological, and political and other burdens of living like that for a long period of time? And my sense was it was purely an intuition that these, not just the leaders and the dissidents, but the broader publics could really benefit from hearing from those who had struggled with similar transitions. And in 1991, we had far fewer examples than, of course, we've had in the last 20 years. We had Argentina and Chile after the collapse of those military dictatorships. We had the transition of Franco in Spain, Greece, denazification in Germany, and maybe one or two examples in Africa. And that's when I had this crazy idea. That's when I was learning. I was kind of an entrepreneur, more in the social than the for-profit sector. And somebody said, well, if you need to raise money, there's this guy named George Soros. So that's how I met him in 1991 in New York. And essentially what we did was we brought together a who's who of leaders, from Václav Havel to literally the leading dissidents of all the post-communist countries in 1991. And that was still an emerging process in many of those countries. But what we did was we brought in leaders from Argentina, like President Alfonsín, who was the post, military dictatorship president. We brought in the heads of the truth commissions from Argentina and Chile. We brought in Telford Taylor, who was the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg. Adolfo Suarez, who was the first prime minister of Spain post-Franco, and a whole range of other people. And not everybody is famous, but people who personally, emotionally, psychologically, and politically try to navigate a transition from dictatorship to democracy. And so in 1992, we had this conference, which I thought would be a one-off conference in Salzburg. And it's like, in a sense, going to the market at the right time. We ended up having all these leaders say, yes, we need this. We can build these institutions, we can create these structures, but if we don't imbue them and inhabit them as citizens, if we don't feel a sense of citizenship, if we don't feel a sense of belonging to this new democracy, then this really won't resonate and work. And so literally what I thought would be that one-off conference grew to where we ended up working in close to 75 countries around the world with this notion of shared experience, of bringing together leaders, former enemies, adversaries, people at different levels, from civil society to the top leaders, who never imagined change was possible in their context, then went through a process of change and felt almost a moral obligation to share it. And I often said it was like a big support group on wheels, because we had these individuals who wanted to share experience. And so I give this background because, one of the things that I and many of my colleagues learned in these countries over the last 25, 30 years is that a lot of conflict remains intractable. A lot of peace agreements remain fragile. And the question is, what are we missing about the human experience? What are we missing about, what humans experience and their fears and their anxieties that make real reconciliation or the resolution of really longstanding conflict difficult? And so that's what led me to brain and behavioral science, because the very sort of foundation of our approach was human experience. It wasn't, 7 steps to yes or something else. It was like constantly looking for those human examples of people that have struggled through change and we felt in others that they had something to offer. And I told Artemis that about 12 years ago, I was teaching a class at the Fletcher School at Tufts, and it was called Conflict Transformation in the 21st Century, the Human Dimension, because I felt a lot of conflict resolution theory was really paper thin or missing the human component in a really sort of practical yet I think, profound way. In every other class, I'd have a speaker come in. And so one class I had Jerry Adams come in from Northern Ireland, if you remember, was the Sinn Féin, he'll never admit it, but also an IRA leader. And a student sat across from him and asked the question, so how do you sit across the table from somebody you may have tried to kill, or they may have tried to kill you, or people may have been killed on both sides? And he sat back and thought, in this sort of very thick North Belfast accent, which I won't try, he said, it's tough to make peace with a humiliated partner. And there was a retired neuroscientist sitting in the room who was probably in his mid-70s at the time. It was about 12 years ago. And he had been sitting in these classes. And he came up to me and he said, you know, there's a lot of brain science behind these themes of humiliation or empathy or fear that different speakers have brought up. I mean, one speaker was Jose Ramos Horta, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in East Timor, or, you know, Zahira Kamal from Palestine. And they, you know, they weren't, you know, primed to discuss this, but not surprisingly, issues of fear, humiliation, exclusion, empathy would come up. And he finally came up and he said, you know, there's a lot of brain science. And I said, what do you mean brain science? I said, I understand some of the social psychology literature or what I've experienced or what I've observed. And he said something so powerful. He said, you know, he said, speaking as a scientist, we're not rational beings with emotions. In fact, we're just the opposite. We're emotionally based beings who can only think rationally when we feel that our identities are understood and valued by others. As we see ourselves, that's how we really begin to think rationally, when we feel that our identities are understood and valued. And at that moment, I had sort of that aha, because it collapsed so much of what I've observed and so much of my experience around the world and in my own upbringing, that one of the benefits where I'm based in Boston is be able to go to these brilliant young scientists at local universities. And I had a big sort of aha moment to realize, you know, that, you know, the Enlightenment got a lot of this stuff wrong, right? We are not rational beings where emotions get in the way. I mean, at MIT, where we have this really powerful partnership over the last decade, you'd have in the, you know, the political science and social sciences department, people being minted with PhDs, that humans are fundamentally rational actors, reason-based beings, and don't even think of cognition and emotion. And meanwhile, you have the departments of cognitive and neuro and other sciences where it's just the opposite, that they're minting PhDs in, right? That we are mammals, that close to 90% of how we think is below the level of conscious access. Focus on how we think, not what we think, because how we think is so deeply unconscious. In fact, over at Northeastern, a brilliant scientist, Lisa Barrett Feldman, who's written a great book about emotion, talks about how our brains evolved to be predictive. And she and many other researchers do that. And it's constantly navigating the world, asking the question, what do others think about me and us? And so the more I got into this, the more I sat back in a quite humbled way and realized that one of the reasons we're dealing with, at least in the work I was doing internationally, so much profound difficulty is because we're burdened with a view of the world, you know, that humans are fundamentally rational beings and emotions keep on getting in our way, when in fact, it's really the opposite. And if we really want to understand the biggest challenges we face, we need to understand how cognition and emotion work in the brain. And one of the great breakthroughs 3 years ago, a friend of mine who's one of the deans at MIT and used to run the political science department, after a conference on norms, narratives, and neurons, and this was 7 years ago, before the Trump election, you know, sort of highlighted the word norm or norms again, you know, that she said that in political science, she says, we make so many assumptions about what shapes human behavior that we miss two of the most important, cognition and emotion. And I sat back and thought, well, on one level, that's a breakthrough. On another level, what else is there? We either think or we feel. And so, you know, we then started really engaging with, you know, at major universities and elsewhere, brain and behavioral scientists, and bring that knowledge and also generate new knowledge to real world challenges around social conflict and social change. And one of the things we did recently, which is how Artemis and I reconnected, is working with colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania. We started looking after the 2016 election at deepening polarization in the United States. And we, working with some brain and behavioral scientists there, wanted to understand how polarization is impacting the psychology of Americans. And so over a year and a half with a series of national surveys, our scientists looked at the role of misperception or meta misperception on a national scale. And Artemis, maybe later you can share the report. It's called America's Divided Mind. And what we did was our colleagues at UPenn is looked at Democrats and Republicans, because I think everybody here knows we're not a multi-party democracy. And so for decades, fault lines have been emerging in the United States that have been aggregating principally in those two identities. And so what we started looking at through a series of questions about big contentious issues, but also about feelings and also about dehumanization, I'll maybe mention this briefly, we found, to no one's surprise, that polarization is deepening and it's becoming identity-based. And we would ask, for example, in this research, we would ask representative Democrats and Republicans. So for example, to a Democrat, we'd ask the question, so where are you as a Democrat, and where do you think other Democrats are on the issue of open borders and immigration? And what we'd find, not surprising, is some strong positions, very different than the Republican side. But there were a lot of Democrats that sort of crossed into the middle. And then when you'd ask a Republican the same, you'd have strong positions, but a lot of Republicans crossed into the middle. But if you'd ask a Democrat, where do you think the Republicans are on the issue of open borders and immigration? The majority response is they want them completely closed. When you'd ask a Republican, where do you think the Democrats are? The majority response is they want them completely open. And so on a series of big contentious issues, from gun control to immigration to abortion, Democrats, Republicans misperceived by nearly 50% the position of the other side. And then on issues of like and dislike, which is, how much do you like the other side? And then the question is, how much do you think they dislike you? It's up near 50%. And then our researchers did some really novel research on dehumanization. So we have a separate initiative called Decoding Dehumanization, because there are a lot of words out there that we use. And I, as a non-scientist, started saying, wait a minute, let's unpack this scientifically. So when we talk about empathy, what does empathy actually mean as a psychological process in the brain? When we talk about humiliation, what is that actually in the brain? When we talk about dehumanization, why do we dehumanize people? How does that actually work in the brain? And we've done, by the way, on our website, there's a report on decoding dehumanization that's really, I think, I say with all due modesty, quite interesting, because it breaks down, like, for example, we process disgust and fear differently in our brain than each other. And knowing that is really important, because how you respond to it is really critical. But on this issue, our researchers for 13 years, not for 13 years, for the last 8 years in 13 countries around the world, looked at blatant dehumanization. It's a very blunt instrument, but if you know the ascent of man scale that shows early primates all the way up to humans, it's a blunt instrument, but it's a very powerful telling instrument. Well, on a scale of 0 to 100, we would ask people, where would you place the groups on this evolution of man scale? Which means, how fully human are they? And we started doing this, as Kim will know, in Europe around the Roma, trying to understand the dehumanization of the Roma. And even finding that in many countries, not surprisingly, the Roma were some of the most dehumanized people. So we brought that here to the United States in this research. And we would ask Democrats and Republicans, where would you place your own tribe, so to speak, fellow Democrats and Republicans? And it's interesting, around the world, nobody puts their own group or community at fully 100%. Because we know our own communities, right? Like, that person isn't fully with it, right? So in the United States, Democrats and Republicans place their own groups at around the high 8s. Like 89, 88, 90. But when you'd ask a Democrat to place a Republican to place a Democrat, it was around 82, 81, 83. So not fully human, but not really bad. But when we'd ask a Democrat and a Republican, how much do you think the other side dehumanizes you? It's up near 50%. Like on like and dislike and on issues. So we sat back and thought, wait a minute. So polarization is becoming identity-based. It's becoming sectarian in the United States. And one thing we know from science is that when we develop an us versus them tribal mindset, a whole range of unconscious psychological processes kick in to then operate under the hood and drive us further apart. It's like just putting fuel on a fire. And we can see that playing out today. But then a lot of that is because we don't know each other. We're getting information in separate silos from separate media, social media, churches, communities, where we live. We don't know each other. And yet, that is driving a big chunk, and also leaders. It's no surprise when you have a leader like the president and others, they have a huge normative influence on people. But people, when you ask them about really core issues and issues like and dislike and dehumanization, they overestimate by 50% how much the other side dislikes them. And so the good news is that we can correct that. And we have colleagues at Harvard and other universities who, with people, literally just telling them that this is a misperception creates a cognitive shift in people's brains. Think of it in our own personal lives. If you think somebody hates you and your family or a neighbor, and then you find out actually they don't, it calms you down. Increases trust and warmth. And that's a really important finding. So that's part of what we're doing, is we're testing various quote unquote interventions through different media and working with different communities and even the media to get this information out there. And like Ezra Klein, Artemis, I didn't think to send it to you, from David Brooks to Ezra Klein and many other people have really written about this, because it's both, here's the difficult thing we need to understand about deepening polarization, but also here's the reality, and here's the good news, and here's what we need to act on to address this. And so I just want to give you a little bit of that background. And, one thing I'll mention, I think of myself as a longstanding progressive, but, we've been doing research. We have a colleague, we've been funding some research over at Harvard, and they're trying to reduce polarization. And they've developed now for a year and a half these games where people are playing games in traditional gaming, where they partner up in cooperation, where there's a liberal and a conservative. And they did some research, and if you know the TV show Duck Dynasty, I don't know if anybody on here watches it, but Duck Dynasty is a reality TV show. And then there's a show, Stranger Things. Well, it turns out more conservatives know Duck Dynasty and more liberals know Stranger Things. So you have a liberal and conservative knowing they're both liberals and conservative playing with each other. And when asked, to the two of them, can we name the cast? The conservatives often say, I can name that. And they both sort of win. And then the liberal says, I can do Stranger Things. And literally, you can see it as we follow it, they're sort of high-fiving each other. But here's the thing. 4 months later, playing a 1-hour game, warmth and division decreases, but it lasts longer with conservatives than it does with liberals. And the hypothesis is that many conservatives are non-college educated, or even if they are, when they come to that game, they come with all these sort of heuristics and expectations that they're going to be looked down upon, they're going to be shamed, they're going to be stigmatized, they're not so sophisticated, they're going to be held in contempt. And when they're not, their warmth towards liberals actually lasts much longer than liberals to conservatives. And we have seen this consistently in other at University of Pennsylvania, at Harvard and others. Is, I think, a really important insight we're going to test further, is that one of the divides in this country is the view that we're looked down upon. And particularly on, I don't want to say just on the right, but people who are non-college educated or live in certain parts of the country or have certain sort of demographic backgrounds. And that's what a Donald Trump and other leaders tap into, a sense of grievance, a sense of people looking down upon you, a sense of people hold you in contempt. And nobody wants to be treated that way. And when you can correct those, it actually has a huge cognitive emotional impact on people in a positive way. So maybe, Artemis, I don't want to spend too much time on this research, but I wanted to mention a bit of that. And And the other thing is we've been doing work on empathy and really trying to bring this into the United States at this moment. And, you know, many leaders I've worked with around the world, from leaders of the African National Congress in South Africa to, you know, other sort of, you know, liberation movements or and other countries, are deeply concerned, not surprisingly, what's happening in the United States, but not on just one side.
Right.
You know, they see it across both sides. They're like, the US can't make the mistakes we made. You know, be tough on structures and institutions, but not on each other. And that's one of the most important lessons that Mandela and many other people said, is be tough on structures and institutions, but not on each other, because then what is it you have to build upon? So maybe, Artemis, I'll finish with that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I want to say that for me, what so deeply resonated is you think about World War I and what happened to the Germans after World War I, and they were humiliated. You look at any war where the winner is not humiliated, like in Japan or in Germany. They were allowed to rebuild their economies in the context of an American or world economy. They were successful. So I think those are pretty good examples of what we can do after the ashes of war to rebuild the dignity of our enemies into friends. And with that spirit, I want Latifa and Colin to share a little bit about your work, why you were inspired to do what you did. And then after you introduce yourselves, we're going to show a little clip of a film that Cray Novick and I have made about Latifa and Colin called Light and Shadows. And we're going to watch just a short clip of that. But before we do that, Latifa and Colin, I would love, in the spirit of what Tim shared with you about the other, about dehumanization, tell us your experience and how liberating it was for you to do this work.
Well, thank you, Artemis. Tim, thank you very much for what you said. For me, it's almost it is a religious doctrine. Aren't we told to love each other and love the other and love our enemies? It's very hard to do. And so you've challenged me, and I'll take that with me in terms of the work that we're doing. But, you know, we went to Greece to work with refugees after we saw Alam Kurdi, the body of Alam Kurdi, a 4-year-old child, face down on a Turkish shore, and with little booties on and a diaper that he'd been very well cared for in his little outfit. And that started us thinking about it, and talking to people in our congregation, say, how could this happen? How can the bodies of babies float ashore? And so that started me thinking about, what could I do? And what role could I play? And it took a couple months to do some research and go to some a conference, not a concert. I did it secretly because I didn't want anybody to talk me out of it. And then I announced, and then actually before that, I saw a picture of an Afghan child pressed up against a fence with a lock on one side of the fence in the rain with a little blanket in her hand that she'd been holding, what was left of her blankie. And I said, I know these people. I know their nobility. I know they shouldn't be treated like this. And then I said, I've got to go. And I announced to my family, I'm going. And Latifa said, I'm going too. And that's kind of what started. So there was some kind of, I would say I felt I knew these folks, and I had lived with them as a Peace Corps volunteer. So for me, they weren't the other, but their treatment was untenable for me. It was unacceptable. And I felt compelled to do something, simply that.
Well, okay. First of all, I would like to thank Artemis for inviting us to this wonderful presentation, and it's an honor to be part of his presentation. And second, for me, other is me. I am the other. I have lived it. I have experienced it. And I am a daughter of a refugee. And I also was incredibly inspired by Artemis's grandparents' incredible work during World War II. So with all of that, you know, I've lived the refugee I was not a refugee, but my parents were. So I know firsthand what is that. And of course, when Colin announced with the, that he was going to go to Greece and help the refugees, I was the first one to say, hey, I'm going with you. And I also have the ability to speak their language. I knew their religious background, their cultural background. So we were a great team. And then my children participated and said, oh, Mom, I want to go. My daughter, Alexandra, my son, Evan, my daughter, Sophia. So we as a family, the first trip was just Colin and I and a friend of ours, a doctor. She's a pediatrician from our congregation, and also my daughter, Alexandra. Then the second trip, we have been there 9 times, on a humanitarian mission to different parts of Greece, mostly to Lesbos and Athens and Camp Moria. And it is incredible to see humanity in despair. And this humanity is you and I. There shouldn't be them and us. For me, it's we are one, and we must reach out to these desperate, devastated people. And some of them, like I was going to, I was looking for my burqa that Artemis suggested that I should wear, Latifa Unveiled, which is part of my book. Under that veil, they are smart, intelligent, wonderful women, better even than me. I wore this burqa for 15 years of my life, but look at me today. I am, I've been a teacher for 30 years in the New York City high school system. I am a human rights activist. I'm a Fulbright scholar. So let's not deceive each other and call them like, oh, the rug-headed Afghans or the whatever, there's all kinds of pejorative terms that Americans have used or Europeans use against the Eastern people. And it's unfortunate that we do not see the humanity in these human beings. They are just like us.
I want to talk about the Greek police.
Sure. Yeah. So Colin is going to get in on the issue. But when you go to Camp Moria, and I hope all of you one day could come. Right now, Camp Moria does not exist, but another camp exists. But there are many other camps of refugee to see these wonderful engineers, doctors, lawyers from their own countries that they have been forced, farmers, all, humanity is on the move. And they've been forced by wars, by atrocity, by economic justice, by environmental justice, and they are on the move. And they're not all terrorists like what Donald Trump says or whomever, and the Republican say, we don't want to let these terrorists to our country. So, when I look at America, how vast and huge America is, and we could take these people and break our walls and reach out to them and invite them over and have them as our neighbors and as our friends.
I just want to relate a quick anecdote, Tim, which we were exercising your principle without even knowing it. We were working with some refugees. They were all in a park, streets, sleeping all over the park with their families. And the police would come with their motorcycles and the general of the police, and they'd kick these people out. And it was like back and forth because the local people wanted control of their park, and the Afghan people primarily had no place to go. And so the police swept in again with their motorcycles. They're all dressed up with their batons and whatnot. And we were talking to them about, why take them out? And they were giving us pushback. And I said, oh, do you know Astoria? We're from Astoria. My son lives in Astoria, which is the big Greek area of New York City. And then we shifted. Oh yeah, my uncle's in Astoria. What restaurant does he go to? And
we developed friendship.
It just calmed everything down. Mm-hmm. And then they said, well, look, just have these folks go. We're going to leave. They can come back, but we got to do our job. So it kind of de-escalated. And it became more fun. you know, in that regard.
So we're going to shift now, and we're going to show a little film called Light and Shadows. And just everyone mute yourself. I'm going to mute myself. It's only 10 minutes we're going to watch. And then we'll come back to all of us for a discussion. So enjoy this new film.
All-time high of 60 million refugees. Worst refugee crisis since the Second World War.
These are people just like us. And it's very easy to be in their shoes. It's very easy.
Can everyone hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Are the refugees, a war,
Yes.
devastation. People are on the move to either die in the Aegean Sea or make it to Europe, make it to America.
It made us all ask, how could dead babies be floating ashore? How could this happen in this day and age?
I don't submit. Life doesn't stop, and I will not stop.
My father tell me, Zahra, you have life now. It's okay. You are free now.
And the light will go on. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel.
There's a pushback everywhere in Greece now. People are tired of it. They lost their tourist season. They lost huge amounts of revenue. They're inundated with people. The people on the islands are angry because the Greek government won't let refugees off the island. So the whole island has become an incarceration camp.
It was not a conversation, it was more of a conviction, being part of this now journey that we've been on for the past 2 years.
What could a couple of people do? We didn't realize how serious this situation was.
Our entire family got together and we worked together. We're gonna go to Greece, how do we do that?
We've been able to go to Greece 3 times in the last 18 months. We're going to go back again. We're going to help build a sustainable worker cooperative in Athens where people can work, they can earn money, they can recover their dignity and their self-respect, and they can prepare themselves for eventual settlement.
My husband and I and my adult children have dealt with thousands of refugees. We bought rice, oil, beans, tomato sauce, and brought them, for 2,000 people.
I feel the responsibility to go to Greece and to take an active part in helping with this refugee crisis.
Around 500,000 Syrians escaping from the war decided, because not having the condition of surviving in neighboring countries, just to cross the Aegean Sea, enter Greece, and to these 500,000 of Syrians, many other nationalities, Afghan, Iraqi, Pakistani, and many other nationalities started following this human river. More than 1 million people entering, mainly through Greece. Migration is part of the human being DNA.
We've just landed in Lesbos, which is a Greek island about 6 miles from the border of Turkey. Along the shores, you'll find several of these dinghies that have brought refugees over. The distance is not far at all, but these waters are extremely dangerous, and thousands of people have lost their lives.
When I see the boat and the sea, a lot of water, I feel so bad. Why we are here? Why we are not in Syria? It's really bad for me, and my father say I cannot stay in Syria. Syria now so bad for me, for my daughters, for all my family. When we are asleep, when so tired because so long, the man, hey, wake up, now we have to go in the night. So in the night, when we have a problem, who can help? Who can help us? And he say, this is not my problem. I will make the boat and you can go. Bad situation, the boat, we have problem. And my father say, my mother, please, guys, it's okay, be relaxed. We have SIM card for all the world. I buy one in Turkey, and I put it in my phone, and then I call Greek people, and the Greek people answer. I'm so happy because they come.
The dark boat, the dark Syrian life, the dark Turkish life, but look at the light that you came. Because you're determined, you're strong. 65 million people that are on the move today. How do we mobilize this world for love and for all? I come from a long line of clerics and imams in Afghanistan. We always greet our friends and our acquaintance with peace be upon you and peace is accepted. The unfortunate thing is that Afghanistan has not seen peace for the past 40 years.
In the past, we enter in contact with a lot of minors being on the street, and most of them being like 14, 15, and just came to Europe looking for something good. A crisis is like something that came and like you have to act to it. Like, this is not a crisis. This is 10 years of this. This is too much. It's just gonna get worse because more people are coming and there is not enough help. Europe is not being a great country to come to.
Europe, open your doors. America, open your doors. Get involved and don't forget about the refugees.
Italy is also a country that has been really affected by the refugee crisis. Like Italy, you have to go to the south of Italy and then try to enter in a camp. It's very hard. Greece make it very accessible for anyone who wants to come and help.
People crash ashore in Lesbos, Greece, and the islands. They walk miles to get here, and you're probably oftentimes the first people they meet. And with very little resources, you do what you can because you care.
I cannot do most of the things that people actually need. I cannot give asylum to someone. I cannot make shorter the time to wait travel documents. Yeah, they need to have food, but they need to have their rights, and I cannot give that. If you are here, far away from your family, far away from your country, far away from your language, far away from anything you have and any possibility you basically had, that means something happened to you. No one does this because they're happy in their country.
At the beginning, you will find most people here had a success story in their own countries, but suddenly the wind changed. Because of the political situation in Egypt, I had to leave the country. It's not my own decision, but I was forced to. It started long time ago with the fake democracy. We are a republic, and we're supposed to be a democratic country, but we are not. It was a big demonstration because of the elections. The results was faked and cancelled, and a lot of people were detained and forced to resign. So we were demonstrating and protesting against this, but they
So you
came.
were caught as a political
Yes.
demonstrator and you were put in prison.
They came to my house, they took everything, took my documents, papers, everything. So for the first time in history, after the French Revolution. More than 200 people at the same court session are facing death penalties in one session for one crime. And you know, this is not right, and this is not justice.
I came to Lesbos because the Lesbos on that time, it was the most busy island with most boats coming to Lesbos. Most of the refugees are Muslims, which means they eat halal meat. And on that time, a lot of locals here was not accepting them on them restaurants, on them coffee bars. Came to the point to make the only one Middle East restaurant in this island. On some point, I find out that my restaurant was not just a restaurant. It was so many other things than a restaurant. They have to stay somewhere, they have to eat somewhere, they have to do something. At most, we was not charging anything. Europe is looking after them, but how and what they are doing? Just making this island a prison for the refugees?
In your country, you have a lot of ideas. You are a father, you are a worker, you are an expert on that, but wherever you cross your country, there are people that they have a lot of identities in the country that they lost them. Wherever they pass, they lost them. We are speaking about children. We are speaking about families. We are not speaking about beneficiaries. These are people just like us. And it's very easy to be in their shoes. It's very easy.
We're all human. We're all in this together. Today it's happening to Syrian, Afghan, and Iraqi. Tomorrow it could happen to the Greeks, to Americans, to anybody.
Every day we have more than 50 people that are coming. They were last week where one day they came about 300 people. Very difficult because people, they told them lies. The smugglers, they told you that with that money you will have food. You will have people that they will watch you. You will have medical care. You will have psychology, gloves, a ticket to go to Germany or wherever. Some of them, they told them that here is Germany.
But these refugees are still with a hope. They paid a lot of money to smugglers to smuggle their son or their daughter. And those sons and daughters have no future because they don't have the right papers. They don't have insurance. So when they get sick and they don't have papers to go to school.
There are people that they're coming here that they don't know what is Europe, which are the countries. They don't know the boundaries. They don't know anything. They believe the smugglers because they have the need to believe them. This is very important. They're selling hope.
What made you leave Afghanistan and made yourself a refugee?
So many things changed in my life. I was 18 years old when I got married. One day she told me that my family, my father is going to give me to someone else, which is older than me, 15 years. They just sold their daughter to an old person. But she was my girlfriend, and she says, Tamim, if you would like to save me, it's good. If you don't, I will kill myself. Then I got her married, but always her brother was calling me, harassing me to find me or kill me.
Right.
But we just had a normal life, slowly, and we made 2 kids.
Your son was stolen by her brothers.
Yeah, they was always trying to attack me, to kill me, and one of them, they find the opportunity and they kidnap my son. If I go to them, they will leave my son calm. If I not, they will kill him. Well, it was too late because when they call us the second time, it is you have only half an hour time. If you would like to come, tell me. If you're not, we will kill your son. So after half an hour, we just receive a call from them. They says, you're too late. You don't like your son. You don't love him. You can find his dead body outside of your house.
And you and your wife and your father were all at home? I'm sorry.
He was at home. When they brought the bags, he was at home. And
How old was your son?
3-year-old, almost
3
3.
years old. And those cruel, terrible people slaughtered your sons and brought it to you. I'm sorry. This is very, very hard for any father or mother to lose a son.
Refugees needs life, new life. They want to merge with the societies. And this will be by educations. This will be by giving them some skills to be able to support themselves. This is my idea and this is my dream. If we look behind the scene, we have a big resource. I don't submit. I started again and I will build my new life. I will not stop. Life doesn't stop and I will not stop.
I feel happy when I stay here. I want to continue my study. I want to be journalist. I want to show all the world what happened in Syria, what happened in Iraq, what happened in the Iran, what happened in the Afghanistan, in the Pakistan. We are so happy, we are so glad because we have a lot of friends from the other country. When I am here, I see my father is good, my family is good, I am good.
From what you've been through and how you didn't have homes and how those police could have taken you for granted, I just love your story. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
It's so wonderful. Thank you so much for what you do. You are the future of our world.
It's a massive flow of humanity that will not end. And in our lifetime, it's probably going to be, we'll be doing this for the rest of our lives. How can you turn away now when you see this? I mean, in the United States, we're starting to turn attention away from it and not really understanding this is a flow of humanity that's not going to stop in our lifetime. If we keep closing the door, we keep making it brutal and inhumane, this is a legacy that we're going to leave behind us, and it's going to be a shameful legacy.
What the most amazing day of my life today. We went to Camp Eliones to see the camp. It was a wonderful camp. We're having a meeting with the director, Andreas, and all of a sudden I see 12 young women walking by. I ran by some force to say hello to them. And the woman looks at me and said, I know you. I said, how do you know me? She says, 2 years ago, you were in Thessaloniki. We were living on the park. And you were the one to help us with money and gave us ticket. We were crying. You saved us from the police force, and you and your husband put us on the train to come back to Athens and come and see our life. We love you. You've saved our life, and we went and had tea with them. It was the most wonderful experience of my life because I always said, do good, put it in the ocean, it will come back to you, and that was it today.
Okay, you can cut it off. The music at the end is so beautiful. We'll play it at the end of the evening. But, you know, that was such a, I mean, I've been crying the whole time I've been watching that. With that spirit, I want to introduce everyone on the call. And if you could just say your name and why you're here and what is inspiring to you about this story, just take a minute for each person. And then we'll come back. If there's a question for Latifa and Colin and for Tim, we'll come back and bring the conversation together. And then we'll end with some very spirited music and some fun gathering music. But Patrick, would you go first, my brother, and just introduce yourself, and then everyone, if you could introduce yourself and share why this is meaningful to you.
Hi, I'm Patrick Crowley. I've known Artemis a long time and have met Latifa, and I'm just meeting Tim now, but been reading his work for the last few days. And it's just inspiring when people shift states. So others are not the other, and we begin to talk to each other and listen. And yeah, so that's why I'm here, and it's amazing to be with all of you. Thank you.
Without Patrick's help, and Sid, why don't you go next, my dear? These are my organizers of tonight's event. So a big shout out to Patrick. Sid, why don't you go next and introduce yourself, my dear?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I am super grateful to be all with you all. It gives me a lot of hope right now during this time. Okay. I'm going to write my message in the chat.
Sid, my dear, we can't hear you. Can you start again?
How about now? Is it a bit better?
Yes.
Okay. I was just saying that I'm super grateful to be on this call. It gives me a lot of hope to be here with you all who are connected to the idea that we are one. We are one species. We are one people, and we are love at the end of the day. And it just is so inspiring to see the Woodhouse family embodying that and taking action on that, and serving as an example of the fact that we can use resources, the resources we have, to help each other. So I just want to say I'm super grateful. My role, you guys get your questions answered. So Artemis for involving me, and thank you all for holding space for this conversation, which is so important right now.
And Sid's going to be hosting also our big talk on Monday night about Florida and why Florida is in such an interesting moment politically. She's from Florida. She'll be reporting live from Florida. So next, why don't we go to Kim Bruzzelata, my darling friend from Italy. And this is an amazing story. My father and mother, when I was not yet born, moved to Italy and met Kim's auntie. And Kim's auntie took pity on my mother and said, "You're going to need help when you get to Italy." And then I was born. Of course, all hell broke loose. And that woman became our nanny for 20 years until her death, Tina Brisala. And it was because of Kim and her auntie that we met her, and she lived with us only until 10 years ago. So Kim, please introduce yourself.
Kim Bruzzelata, old friend of Artemis Joukowsky and admirer, and also of Tim Phillips. I was present at Tim's earlier neuroscience and conflict conferences at MIT. And so when I saw your name, Tim, I thought I have to be here and see you again. So, and I also want to say about the Woodhouses, I'm just awed by you seeing, we all saw that picture of that poor little boy around the world, but you too did something about it, and it's such a huge problem, and you are actually making a difference. So I'm really inspired by you.
Thank you.
So thank you.
And I'm happy to say that my new film, Genetics of Hope, which is about a cure to my disease, Kim has been my executive producer and has supported me from the very beginning. So she's a filmmaker. And just say a little bit about your work, Kim, as an activist and a filmmaker.
So I am the executive vice chair of the Hamptons Film Festival, but I joined the board 20 years ago to start a section of films from conflict regions. And I give an award to one of those films each year from a region of violent conflict. So I've seen a lot of films about the refugees, and I also used to fund conflict resolution projects. And that's what led me to meeting Tim through mutual friends and being fascinated with the idea that he was initiating really of the cross-section of neuroscience and conflict. So
I'm not going to call in anyone, just jump in. But Barry and Maja, why don't you go next, just for the sake of your beauty?
Could I talk for you also?
Sure.
Well, we are friends of Artemis and the Woodhouse family. I serve on the board of Shared Humanity. And like someone else just said, we're totally in awe of the work that they do. And definitely want to support that. And, you know, listening to Tim, that was a wonderful report, Tim. Thank you. And it makes you think about how all people should be treated with respect. You shouldn't talk down to people, and you have to give them the ability to make decisions that affect their own lives. And that's so true in the field of philanthropy. That's all.
Thank you.
Barry, say a little bit about the Unitarian Church at Shelter Rock and what you guys have done as a community to fund these kind of efforts, because it's extraordinary. As a Unitarian church, you have an endowment of $500 million that you give to Unitarian missions like this. And just talk a little bit Shelter Rock, just so we know who Shelter Rock is.
Yes, we don't call ourselves a church. We're the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock. And from an endowment from the Veach family, this goes way back to just after World War II. We have a huge endowment, and we're spending the income from that became so vast that they decided to start a program. It's called the Veach program at Shelter Rock, whereby each year we give away approximately $12 million in grants to many organizations. About 1/3 of them are Unitarian Universalist organizations, and that includes the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which is actually founded by Artemis's grandparents, and lots of other secular kinds of organizations, mostly for grassroots organizing.
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay.
Brian, why don't you go next? Brian Jennings.
Okay. Well, I came here to listen and to learn. I met Artemis and watched his movie about his grandparents at UU General Assembly a few years ago, and I bought a copy of it and took it home to my UU church, and then I contributed a little bit of money to help go further, and was really quite amazed when Ken Burns and Tom Hanks got involved with it and expanded it. And I thought the first one that Artemis did was really a great show, but they expanded on what he did, and a whole lot more people saw it at that point. So I've been trying to follow what Artemis has been doing, and I'm coming here tonight because the level of discourse in the country has just been at such a low point for recent months, and coming here and listening to this is just at such a higher plane than what our government and our leaders are thinking on, and it gives me a boost. It helps me to have some hope that maybe things could get better.
Thank you. And then the producer of that film with me Larry Rothstein, and the executive director of No Limits Media. And that says it all, No Limits Media. Larry, please introduce yourself, my brother.
Hi. As Artemis said, I'm the executive director of No Limits Media. And we've been dealing with, our mission is really to show the value and abilities of people with disabilities or different abilities. And the kind of othering that has been discussed tonight is certainly prevalent in the way people react to disability. And what Colin and Latifa did exemplifies the kind of moral courage that Artemis's film about his grandparents certainly displayed, and that they've continued that Unitarian tradition. And also the conflict resolution discussion today was very illuminating and touched on some of the things actually brought up yesterday about basket full of deplorables, how liberals are unaware of how they're alienating the people who become the Trump voters, because those people feel like they're being put down constantly. And it was interesting to me about the gaming, how people can come together and then split apart, and the conservatives actually are kind of nicer people. They still feel warmer towards the liberals than the liberals towards the conservatives. So this evening's touched on a lot of things, plus a project that Artemis is aware about. It's actually a movie idea about the first 10 years of our country, where a lot of these issues of division and systemic racism actually originated. And the idea is to try to get people to talk to each other about the true founding of this country, as opposed to what they think the founding was, and constantly sort of exalt the founding or denigrate the founding by toppling statues. But I don't think either side actually knows that much about it, certainly. Anyway, so it's been very moving and very enlightening, and I certainly like to follow up. And I thank everybody, including Artemis.
We will have a special.
Where did you start?
Suddenly, uh-oh.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry, my computer just went out. Larry, would you explain a little bit about inclusion at work and what we're doing on Bloomberg TV?
With Artemis's help and Joukowsky's help, we're attempting to launch on December 5th a 4-part series called Inclusion at Work, which will be the first program that I know in the history of television that is designed to help people with disabilities get jobs. And more than that, it's probably the first television program or series developed by all different kinds of people with disabilities, from learning disabilities to physical disabilities, developmental disabilities. Every aspect of this has been touched by disabilities, including the music, which will be performed by a young boy, actually a 10-year-old from the Berklee School of Music's Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs. He composed it and performed it with the help of his teacher. So I think it's going to exemplify what people with disabilities, if they get themselves together, can actually do, and show the world that they're capable of creating a first-rate program on their own.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'd love to shift now to Jarrett Bouillon, my darling friend who led our discussion last night about the cult of Trump. And would love to have you share yourself, my dear.
Thank you, Artemis. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Latifa and Colin. What an honor it is to take in your such thoughtful and thought-provoking and heartfelt work. For me, there are so many overlays of the work that I'm currently doing with cult awareness education. And, you know, for me, the exciting thing that we're starting with now, and I think how it how tonight's conversation fits the most is with a project that I've just launched through beautiful synchronicity with others called hashtag I Got Out. And it's a movement where we're really encouraging people to speak up, share their experience of having experienced power over abuse in whatever way, typically in the group setting, but cults come in all sizes, shapes, from massive governments all the way down to the family unit. And, if we can really truly be honest about how often people experience cultic environments, it's a way that we can help really move the needle towards greater compassion in the ways that both Latifa and Colin and Tim are really exemplifying tonight. It's so exciting and heartwarming to me that we have a ready movement of people to greet those, all of us, as we become more and more human. The more vulnerable we are, the more human we are. And transparency is of our lived experience is the way to go. So it's beautiful to meet you all tonight. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. Great to you.
And one of the distinctions we made last night is that a cult is generally an organization or a movement where your individual spirit is shut down, where fear is part of the division. And what we're talking about is the liberation of the human spirit, where each of us have to find our own liberation. And that is a movement of love. And that's really what we want to focus on, is how do we embody that ourselves, but how do we build organizations the way Tim has, the way Latifa and Colin have, that institutionalize love. And in that spirit, I want to please introduce my dear friend, Norm Sender. Are you there, my brother?
Yes, I am. I was actually thinking that I have something to say about that. Excuse my voice. I have contracted a frog. Thank you, Artemis, dear friend, for such a lovely introduction. I'm so moved by all the work and the quality of the work and the precision and the excellence of the investigation among all of us, and the loving kindness from our heart towards society, and the inquisition, the inquiry, that's actually what I meant, about what drives us, what motivates us. So, some of you are incredibly scholarly, and some of you incredibly adventurous. And I think we all are united for one purpose here. And I think the convener of this purpose is our friend Artemis, Timmy. I mean, you may know him in so many ways, in so many words, but it's love. Simple, just like, each of us for ourselves as individuals know what it means. When you start trying to figure out what love is in a global or communal or state or village or town, it gets really complicated. But if you figure out what love means for yourself as an individual, there's hope. Mm-hmm. Because I haven't seen any society or any organization that has healed without knowing in their citizens' hearts, espousing for broadcasting this message of love, and like how many societies do that? I'm not gonna go scholarly on that, but Artemis, man, this is so wonderful of you to invite all these incredible voices, and the what I don't want to point out people and what they're doing, but I say, I guess, I say that love, one thing about love is that it's like now, it's present. It's not historical, it's not scholarly, it's like, boom, it's like love, okay, that? Love.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Will you play for us at the end, my love?
Yes.
Noam is my drummer, and part of the percussion group of Love. And thank you. I want to introduce.
Thank you, Artemis.
I want to introduce your work as a healer on another show, and really go deeply into the male voice of today. Men are lost, in my opinion, without mentors like Tim and Colin and Patrick and Tim and Larry. We need men who are loving, who show what's possible. And I think part of our crisis is about men. And so with that overlay, I would love to introduce Cheryl, for you to speak a little bit about your work and introduce yourself.
Nancy, hello.
You're talking about me, Cheryl Peralt. Yes, I'm very glad to be here and be learning from all of you. I'm here to learn and listen as well. And I am in admiration of Artemis and his work that I've learned a great deal from. And I have met Artemis through small community events that I have been connected to, involved with, focusing on the arts that people have to share in a program that I had hosted called Wake Up and Smell the Poetry, involving poetry, story, and song, and how art can bring us together. And that just ended this year after 14 years at local cable television. And Artemis provided a wonderful program of his films and talking about his life there that inspired many. And I've been involved with local storytelling at a number of centers in different towns and communities, in healing arts and in cafes, promoting the importance of our stories that we have from our life and how we get to know one another and understand each other at a deeper level, which I think is so important these days. I learned of that importance from doing hospice volunteer work for a number of years and working on life reviews with people at the end of life, and saw how important the process of having a person pause and reflect on life, what that does for the person in working toward wholeness, but also provides opportunity to share stories with others and inspire them, just as I've been inspired tonight in hearing the stories from Latifa and Colin and their connection with the people they have helped, the refugees, and hearing the stories of the work with Tim. And I am encouraged by this. My background is in psychology, and I feel these past years, this year in particular, very concerned about the need for more love. And so glad that's being talked about, and of human connection and understanding one another is so important. And I think stories does this. Artemis's films, one-to-one storytelling in a large group, all important ways of making a bridge to understand and come together. And I've been really worried that we're losing feeling, and talking about the importance of feeling. We're disconnecting from that and feeling from one another. So I'm very interested in finding ways that we can grow that with one another. One of the projects I'm working on is a new community program with the title of What Brings Us Together. So I have a lot of nice ideas from hearing from all of you and your presentations tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Edna, would you introduce yourself, Edna?
I'm still curious how the heck I got on your invitation list, but I'm glad to be here. I'm 82. Was a lawyer. I've always been politically active in some way ever since I was, 14 years old in 1952, and I was madly for Adley. I don't know what to say. I'm totally wrapped up in this election mentally, too much, appalled by it. And that's what's uppermost in my mind at this moment, plus writing my memoirs that I've been doing for several years. That's about it. I'm very impressed with all of you. I'm very impressed with where you are and why you're there. And I'm glad to be part of you.
Joanna, my dear, from Hampshire College, the UU Church in Northampton. You've been there with me from the very beginning of my young career. Tell us about your work and your passions.
Thank you so much, Artemis. Yes, I've been a member of the Unitarian Society in Northampton for 30 years now, and Artemis and his daughter and several others came to show his film when it was still in development. So I thank you so much for that experience. My father's an immigrant. My mother's father and great-grandfather were immigrants. I'm tutoring right now a wonderful 7-year-old Tibetan girl in Queens. I tutor remotely every day to help her not fall through the cracks in school, remote school. I guess I feel like you are just laser focused, Artemis, on the most important issues in our lifetime. And I feel like I am a sponge. I'm trying to soak up as much as I can and share my experience and hope. I would like to see this film be distributed to every human being in the world, because I know you're going to need deep pocket donors, and unfortunately I'm not one of them. But I believe if every single person can have their heart opened, every single person can do something. So I'm just thrilled to be here tonight and just honor you, Artemis, and your life trajectory and where you're showing the way, and also the Woodhouses and their story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanna and I became dear friends raising money for Hampshire College. And for those who don't know, Hampshire College is still alive and kicking.
Good.
And, it's all about project-based learning. And what the Woodhouses have done is project-based learning. What Tim has done is project-based learning. We're learning by loving, by doing. With that spirit, Brenda, would you introduce yourself and your darling Andy? You have to unmute yourself, my dear.
I did, thank you. I'm delighted to have received your email. I've known Artemis for many years, and he's someone that embodies love. And I think it almost wouldn't have mattered what that email was about, I would be there. But the fact that you talked about democracy, that's been something that we've been participating in a group in Concord, Mass, called Reclaim Our Democracy. And like I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, we've been very concerned about what's happening in our country. And about the issue of immigration, this is something that's been very key issue for Andy. I began thinking about, I'm half Mexican. My father was Mexican. I never met him. I don't know much about him. I'm sure he was an immigrant. My mother didn't tell me much. My mother was French and English descent. So I was this mixture growing up in Chicago and feeling like, you know, discrimination. And my last name was Gonzalez and I couldn't speak Spanish. And I didn't fit in. Most of the Latinos were Puerto Rican in my high school. But when all of this happened with the borders issues in Mexico, I thought, oh my God, you know, this could have been me. It could have been, you know, my father's family coming here. And my daughter, Julie, now lives in Tucson. And so she's very, you know, close to what's happening there. So all I could say is thank you so much, Artemis. You know, Andy's new to the area for the last 3 years, although he grew up here. And so I want him to meet people like you, all of you. And Artemis, you're so right about men. You know, here's a man, he's a wonderful man. And I'd love to have him connect with some of these wonderful people here, especially the guys. So thank you, Artemis. Andy.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. I'm so delighted to be here. It seems like a very fortuitous serendipity that I showed up. My career was really about interpersonal communication and helping people to connect. I wrote a book called Creating Harmonious Relationships based on nonviolent communication. And then I followed that career for a while, and then I went into a cult. For 6 years, I was pursuing the love of God, but it was an abstract thing. It wasn't like hitting the drum here and now. And it completely broke me, and I was a wreck, and just really like a dry leaf blowing. And I finally got out after 6 years, and I met Brenda. And I've been resuscitated. I'm alive again, rejuvenated, and I'm so happy. And she's the most loving person I've ever met or known in the world. And so I'm tremendously happy about that. And so I really enjoyed the Tim's and Colin and Latifa's presentations. They're fabulous. And now I teach English as a second language to immigrants, and I really enjoy that.
Love that.
Thank you very much.
And I want to introduce my cousin, Helen Dewey. Helen and I are working on a project to tell the story of our great-grandfather, Dallas Lorsharp, who was a great naturalist and wrote 26 books, was a professor of English at BU. And we have found the most beautiful archive of love letters and writings. And he wrote, the most famous thing he ever wrote was Turtle Eggs for Agassiz. And Agassiz was the great scientist at MIT that needed turtle eggs. Actually, this is a sad story. Agassiz's work and others' work fell into eugenics based on DNA. And so there's a kind of interesting thing where scientists become literally the prophets of doom. They have brilliant notions of science, but then they take it into the justification of ending certain lives based on their DNA. And so that is actually a very powerful story that we need to investigate, is our love of understanding DNA, but then how do we use that information to separate us or bring us together? Helen, I don't mean to put you on the spot with that introduction, but you are my darling cousin, and tell the story a little bit of how we met and also what you care about in Syracuse, New York.
Oh, sure. Artemis and I met, I reached out to you, I think it was June in 2016, leading into the presidential election. My alma mater was actually having a very bad time with some anti-Semitic activities from a very small group of students. And I reached out to Artemis, who was this cousin I had heard about, and I had heard about his film project, but hadn't actually met yet. and reached out and said, you know, I really need to do a screening of your film. And I was amazed that when I called that he actually picked up the phone. In a world of everyone always leaving messages for everyone. We hit it off immediately. And then 2 months later, we actually met in person in the White House screening room, which is really, you know, a pretty amazing moment just to reconnect with family. But just with that whole story of Sharp's War, of how Martha and Wade still have worked so hard to help other families stay connected, for us to be able to come full circle and for us to then have a moment where the tapestry of our family's relationships had a moment to get reconnected as well was really pretty tremendous. And so we've had a wonderful experience working on the Sharp's War project. For years, I've worked on genealogy work for the family and picked up the mantle that prior generations have worked on. And Dallas Lore Sharp is someone that is easy for us as a family to read because so much of his stories are about South Jersey, where the family had originated from. And essentially looking at the spirituality of observation of science and how to commune with nature, even in very small ways, that just sitting and being present in a place and connecting with where you are is a big, big part of his writings. And so over the past few years, I've been connecting with different people in South Jersey, helping me do research and taking me out into the marshes and helping me find original family lands and just, you know, investigating that sense of place, but then realizing the sense of place that I have for family also extends to other people who have a same shared love of the environment. And so I've been running around with a duck decoy hunter and meeting some other wonderful people down in South Jersey and having a great time, but then finding this cache of love letters in Boston at an archive and just going through those and reading about Dallas Lore Sharp writing to his wife and having these wonderful lines of, is it wrong for a husband to want to kiss his wife so much? And just, you know, just a very warm, effervescent personality, which for those of you who know Artemis personally, I think that may be in our DNA because that same kind of exuberance comes through Artemis and just being able to embrace everyone around him. So I thank all of you for being here tonight. This is just living in a small world right now with COVID. It's so wonderful to have a chance to step out of the immediate confinements, look at the bigger issues, and still know that there is a place for us to be out there active in the world in a different way, to make sure that the pathways are still there for people to get out of harm's way. And Latifa and Colleen, what your family is doing as a family is tremendous and just takes huge fortitude year in and year out to keep up fighting the good fight and being the better angels.
You're here.
So,
Better
thank
angels.
you.
Thank you, my darling. And Marla, would you introduce yourself, my dear? Marla, would you like to introduce
Are you
yourself?
talking to me? Me?
Yes, it's you.
Yes. Okay. It's Maria. I was scanning for someone named Marla in here.
Maria, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No worries. Hi, I'm Maria Caddison. I'm artist. I actually live down the street from you. I'm the corner of Goulding and Lake Street.
Oh.
It's got a note. So yeah, I just was intrigued by the title of this group meeting today and wanted to come check it out. I've been so struggling for so long with you know, this notion of other and how there's so much, you know, hate and not just you know, it's not that, you know, it's almost like the Rodney King, can't we all just get along? You know, like it's pretty simple, right? Like just get out of your head and try to pull some love out in front of yourself and for yourself and for others. So I've been, you know, it's been a difficult few years, right, with the political situation that we have. And, you know, one thing that I would share with you guys, and I wish I could remember where it was from. There was this piece of research that I saw a few years ago, and it looked at a desire to give charitable gifts to the socioeconomic group that is just below the one that you're in. So if you think of sort of a totem pole, right, even from the highest paid lowest to those to the bottom of the society and the bottom. And it turns out that the least generous group in terms of wanting to give to the group right below them was the group that was second from the bottom. And I see that as the second up from the bottom is saying, if I give to them, then I'm going to be the bottom, right? And it ties into what Tim referenced from Jerry Adams, probably the humiliation and how much humiliation and emasculation plays into so much anger and hostility in the world. And I'm just so delighted to be here in this group with you all. And I'm so incredibly impressed and almost overtaken with the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for all of that.
Maria, nice to meet you.
Same.
We should get together at Farm Pond sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Which house are you? Are you in the greenhouse?
I'm next to the greenhouse. I'm right. I'm the Sherburne Yacht Club. I'm the middle.
Got it. Got it. I was on my stand-up paddleboard a lot this summer looking around. So.
You're all welcome to come to Sherburne and swim in our pond. We have
Wonderful.
a pond that's like the United Nations. When you feel in it, you're like part of a bigger community of fish and other things.
Right, right.
Where is this? What state is this in?
This is in Sherburne, Massachusetts.
Ah, okay.
And about 45 minutes from Boston. And we live on a kettle pond. It's about 100 acres, formed at this recession of the Ice Age, like Walden Pond is also a kettle pond. There are 10,000 kettle ponds. And Lake Baikal is the largest in the world, actually. And we're lucky to live here and take care of it and love it. And in that spirit, I want to introduce Tina, my dear friend, Tina, and say a little bit about your passions and love. And then please introduce Carl to us.
Well, thank you, Artemis, and thank you for the opportunity. It's been a journey, like for everybody else during this whole video. So enlightening listening to Tim and all your esteemed guests. I do have another one I would like to introduce. I'll just go right to Carl Hobart. I'd like to introduce. He's worked in Rwanda for many years, assisting President Paul and First Lady Jeanette Kagame in creating a strong post-genocide school. He was there just, I think, and Carl can correct me if I'm off a little, he was there during the tail end of the genocide. So he saw some things and it was difficult, but the result of his efforts has been weaving conflict resolution exercises into the curricula of public and private and parochial schools here and worldwide. So he's really done a lot. He's currently a clinical instructor at BU, and he's also founder and CEO of Axis of Hope Center for International Conflict Management and Prevention. So he's very knowledgeable in this conversation about conflict resolution and creating peace and helping humanity. It's a Boston-based nonprofit, and he's also author of, he wrote a book, Raising Global IQ, Preparing for Our Students for a Shrinking Planet. So Carl, if you're there, I'd love to just pass it on to you. Thank you.
Tina, thank you very much. I really appreciate the kind invitation, and I'm lucky to come in kind of on the tail end of this. I'm sorry I got involved late. I was at another meeting earlier. I am Carl Hobart, and I now live in Acton, Massachusetts after returning from Rwanda. I grew up out in Minneapolis, right near the Mary Tyler Moore House in a really nice neighborhood. And I also grew up at the height of busing and went to public schools. And my best friends were Native American, African American, Cambodian, Laotian, Somali, all different backgrounds. And I saw racism that existed there. And I decided that there are winners and losers in the zip code lottery. And I didn't think it was fair that my friends who were losers in the zip code lottery didn't have the same opportunities that I did. That started me on a path to study conflict resolution and go to the Tufts Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where I focused on this whole idea of role play, live role play, so that students in public, private, and parochial schools can come together to act out different scenarios of different conflicts around the world. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict, post-genocide Rwanda, I write case studies that are role plays, and they then play them out live, and they learn how to walk in the shoes of others through those live role plays that totally and completely changes their image of conflict. And I teach basic things like the word listen, spelled another way is silent. Spelled a third way is enlist. And if you listen more by remaining silent, you can enlist yourself into a new way of thinking and another person into much more respect for you. And can you imagine getting off the plane in Kigali, Rwanda, not long after the height of the genocide in 1994, after I'd graduated from Fletcher in 93, I cannot even explain what I saw there. And I started to work on education reform for then General Paul Kagame, who is now President Paul Kagame, while Paul Farmer, Jim Kim, and Ophelia Dahl were there working with Partners in Health to help with the medical field. And the Israelis were there to help with security. I learned so much from all of those people in terms of how to set up a good place once again that is very stable and secure. You can see it's my passion. And I can't tell you what I've seen over the years there. And what I do when I come back to the States is teach students here about conflicts like that one in Rwanda, so that they have to role play different sides in that conflict. They're then connected via Zoom with students there, and then I take them there physically in the summer, so they experience it based on the experiential education ideas of John Dewey, Montessori, et cetera. So this is what I believe in. And my book, Raising Global IQ, Preparing Our Students for a Shrinking Planet, talks about the need for language acquisition early in life, the idea of cultural fluency and understanding cultures differently and respecting other cultures, the idea of knowing the geography of the world, getting outside of your box to think differently about the world. And that I in Global Intelligence Quotient is also meant to show that it helps our intelligence community academically and in terms of the United States government. How have I learned about doing this in the formative years of life? Israel. They do the same thing with middle school and high school students. So I'll stop there. You can see it's my passion. I could talk about this for another 20 hours.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I actually have to say he really could. So
Can you tell us his name again?
We want to do a whole show with you, because now we have to practice our preaching. We have to now do what you're saying in real time, because we don't learn unless we do it. It's
right.
John Dewey taught us that experience and democracy and education are connected. If we're not educated, we can't be democratic citizens. And from that, I want to introduce my dear Alexandra Woodhouse. You are now the executive director of Shared Humanity. You have seen your mom and dad from the beginning of this journey, and you've been with them. Why don't you share your experience as a, are you Generation X, M, or Y? I don't know. But just Alexandra Woodhouse, please.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having this conversation tonight. You know, I always learn so much from you, Artemis, and the friends that you have in your circle. It's just a wonderful testament to who you are and really the people that you are, associated with. So thank you so much for having this conversation. And, of course, for inviting my family to speak about our, about Shared Humanity. Shared Humanity USA truly is, I'll kind of kick it back to my upbringing, but my parents truly are such incredible role models for me and the work that I do. I recently was working at UNICEF on their corporate partnerships team. And I would just say that, a lot of my humanitarian values and my social justice values really stem from who they are as people and, of course, the way in which they raised our family. And I feel very grateful for that. And I know I always talk about my parents, especially in all the interviews I'm having now, but it's true because, they really are such incredible humanitarians and have truly showed us all as a family, how to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I just, I learned so much from them. And, we started this journey back in 2016, and it's been remarkable to see how much we've been able to accomplish as a family, and truly how much we've been able to accomplish for refugees that are stranded in Greece right now. And it's a very unfortunate situation, but to be able to do that kind of work, and especially as winter is approaching, it's just been incredible. So I won't take the time too much. I hope you guys can hear me. But I really just appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about our humanitarian efforts, and just to be able to have this dialogue. Tim, your remarks were really inspiring, and I hope that I live by your words and your research in my day-to-day working with refugees, and I'm really grateful to be here. So thank you, everyone.
And before we go to Tim and Latifa to end our program, I would like anyone else who would like to introduce themselves to speak up right now. I'm noticing someone called Leonard Dwork, but that's not you, my dear. What is your name?
You may remember, Artemis, my name is Nancy Nowak, and I've been associated with you a little bit, and certainly with Unitarian Universalist Service Committee for now decades. It's all good. And as you were working, struggling and persevering to get the movie about your grandparents. And so I honor this program and what you've continued to do. I've known the Woodhouses, Colin and Latifa, and now I know a bit of their family after this program. And so it's wonderful to see and hear and know the work that they have been doing with refugees, but they were doing whole lots more throughout their life. I was along with the Peace Corps, like Colin, we shared that, and helped me expand my view of life, and made me feel like a citizen of the world. Of course, we're troubled now, all of us, I think, with our country, and the focus on immigration tonight, and the cruelty of our own country with immigration really within our borders, if you will, and along our borders, it is all elevated for us. It's been wonderful to meet everyone on the picture here. I appreciate so much Jim Phillips' discussion of conflict resolution and the whole biology of it. I think it's phenomenal. I would like to follow that, because we have to learn everything to move toward peace that we possibly can. I just learned that there's an U.S. Institute of Peace. I really didn't know it existed in Washington, D.C. And so that was heartwarming that we at least have that. I know we have war colleges, and perhaps they're trying to figure out how not to go to war, but the Institute of Peace is certainly a tool, and the United Nations and our relationship to that as a world community. I'd like to say that I'm amazed to meet Carl Hobart from Acton, Massachusetts, because our grandchildren, our daughter and her husband, live in Acton. Ben is a senior, and he will go to Tufts next year. Perhaps he will take a course with you, Carl. So I'd like to connect. It's wonderful to see Latifa and Colin, and I wish you all wonderfully well.
Same here, Nancy Nowak, my best friend. I love you.
All right, so in that spirit, Latifa, you're next, my darling. So now that you have this framework of love around you and all these great actors of humanitarians and a new social framework for your school about how we are emotional beings largely, and we don't think until our hearts are not threatened. In that spirit of that ontology, how do you understand your work in a different way now from this conversation? And what skills, and I'm bringing you, Carl, into this, you, Tim, into all of us in the personal growth aspect of social change. What are we going to do now in your school besides teach language? What are we going to do to help refugees realize that the evil problems that they're having can be cured by human problems? And Tim, I would love you to talk about the workbook in a second, but Latifa, share your thoughts.
Well, Artemis, dear, as I've always said, I am an emotional being. I have lived it. And tonight, through these wonderful scholars and all the, what Tim talked about and what Carl talked about, it really, I resonate very, very much with their philosophy, with their writings, with their approach to cultural understanding. I am a human being that when my student would ask, I taught for 30 years in the New York City high schools, that where are you from, Mrs. Woodhouse? I would say I'm from the world. I relate to all. I am a human being that belongs to the entire world. And my children would always say, Mom, you talk to all people, to the older, to the younger, to, in my congregation, whenever they would see me in action or in my schools. And I say, I love the entire world, regardless of where they're from, who they are, what the color of skin is. This is me. That's how I was, from day one when I was born. That is in me. And of course, my father has a big role, and my mother in that too. But I'm the citizen of the world. So for me, it comes easy, and I relate to that. And I love the tonight's discussion of all these wonderful people about love. Like Sydney said, love is the answer for everything. We must reach out and love all. Life is too short for discriminating and building walls and, this is my neighborhood, this is my territory. I don't believe in that. So it comes to me easy, and I welcome it with open arms and open heart. And that's why my work for humanity in general, before the refugee flight, has always been something that I have done with my international students, English as second language. I taught for 30 years. Oh, wow. Always students from all over the world. I feel like I've been in their places and their houses. I relate to them. I have married them. I have been, they have lived with me. It's just, for me, a world is a wonderful, beautiful place if we could relate to all. That is what I say. And I also wrote this book, which if you get a chance, Latifa Unveiled, because I was a veiled woman for 15 years of my life in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And that book will tell you all about me, who I am, who I was, who I have become, and what my journey is it is right now, and how I believe in humanity. And Share Humanity was the name that Colin and I selected for our nonprofit that has been now from 2016 till now. And thanks to Artemis efforts in the Joukowsky Foundation and the Fred and Gilda Noble Foundation for their utmost support to carry us on to help the refugees. I appreciate that so, so much. And all of you could go, and I want to put that one word in. So our foundation is sharedhumanityyusa.org, and help in any way you can. The nonprofit that helps the refugees, not only in Greece, but in the United States also. Thank you.
Thank you. And how many families have you helped in not feeding, but getting from Lesbos to Germany or to Europe? Is it?
I would say about 250 or more that are living right now in Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway. But, you know, I'm in contact with some of them on a daily basis. We have saved people from living in park. We have put them in rental houses in Greece until they got on their feet and, you know, got away to Germany. It's just amazing. You know, you just had Tamim, who told his story of a son that was slaughtered to pieces and brought up. Tamim now has a beautiful life in Germany, and he had another son that was born, and he's sending me, he says, look how you helped me, you know, and here's my life. So that is our success story. That is our impact story. And I thank you for that too, because you have been a big part of the support in the money that you are giving us to empower us to help these refugees. So thank you all, and every little dime counts for these refugees, to empower them to go on their own way. They're smart, they're bright, and they'll make it, but they need that push. They need that reaching out. And we can do that for all of you.
Everyone say in honor of Latifa, Inshallah.
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 We love you.
Inshallah.
Colin, you married this crazy woman. What are you doing here, man?
Inshallah.
What's your conclusion for tonight? Inshallah.
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 Allah Akbar.
That means with the will of God, we will make it. We'll make it happen. All of us together. United said. Donald Trump will go away in 2 days, 1 day. What is it? 24 hours. He'll be gone.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Colin, my brother, I want you and Tim to finish us off in your conclusion thoughts about the framework of our emotions, how it affects
Tim, you know, I feel you've laid down the gauntlet for me. Just away for a few minutes to talk to my son about what your message was, because we were agonizing about this. How can people support Trump? What don't they see? And we've been trying to figure that out. You've laid some foundation for me, and also a challenge that I shouldn't be so judgmental, and I have to be careful about that. Right. And I had to find some common ground. My brother is a Trump supporter, and I love him dearly. So we have to work this out. You know, we can make fun of each other and laugh about it, doing the same with other people. But thank you very much, all. You're such wonderful people.
Oh my
it's
God.
So great. You know, I wish we were all together, and you'd be great in Greece, or you'd be great on the front of the refugee crisis. You show what's best in America, the diversity, the love, the thoughtfulness. And again, I've learned so much from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Tim, will you finish us off? Actually, there's one other person who's joined, Jackie. Would you like to introduce yourself before Tim goes and just share what's inspiring to you, my dear?
Thanks. It's been 10 years or something since I met you on the Canna bus. So I'm just interested because I'm an educator. I mean, I'm a theater person, really. I'm a mime by profession, but I take in all the work I've done, including a lot of corporate events and all marketing stuff, etc. And I'm back to teaching teachers. And I have a company or an organization called All in Play. It's allinplay.org, allinplay.org, which is easier to just take a look instead of me talking, and there's some video on there. But I'm interested in taking it abroad.
Good, let's go to Greece.
Oh, it's language proof. And I think if you look on the site, you'll see why it is. Some of the videos in Mexico, it's easier to shoot there and get. I'm basically teaching early childhood educators. I've also worked with first, second, third, fourth grade classrooms to take their content and their social, emotional learning into projects that involve theater. So, and making stories up. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Jackie. Tim, you finish us off, my brother. You have inspired us so deeply. Bring it all home. This is
wow, this is tough. The one quick thing I have to ask Colin is, did you know Nancy Hatch Dupree?
Oh, yeah, I did very
Yes,
well.
yes, sure.
I had her book.
And
I
Louis
went to her house in Kabul. I had
Yeah. So
dinner.
so we'll have to have a separate conversation. I knew her well because I spent time. I used to be on the board of the International Rescue Committee. So I was in Afghanistan in the mid-90s when the Taliban was emerging. But with that, how do I end this? By saying, you know, as a non-scientist, one of the things that I've learned from science that really connects to experience, whether it's what I said about, you know, some of the dynamics of polarization in this country, or in Rwanda, talking to people who survived the genocide, or other people I've met, you know, people who have survived torture. I mean, real sort of torture and some of the most unspeakable things that humans can do to humans. One of the things I learned, and it's really quite humbling, is they feel a profound need to understand, why would another human being do this to me?
Right, right.
And when you strip it away, it is that sort of torture strips people of their basics foundation. You could call it love, you can call it self-worth, you can call it dignity, you can call it self-esteem, but why would they do this to me, right? And when the sense of healing begins, it's not only when they felt that they began to understand why others did it, but when they felt that the perpetrator, if they ever met the perpetrator, was traumatized by what they had done to them, there's a catharsis. Because for the perpetrator to suffer is to recognize that what I did to you was wrong because you did not deserve it as a human being. And so it comes to the victims wanting to feel understood. It's these people in some of our surveys, when they feel understood, they feel a deeper sense of warmth to the other side, right? When I was doing work in Baltimore with people working in gang violence in some of the poorest communities, this one woman broke down and cried when a colleague of mine who's a scientist said, well, in a sense, we have not only in a sense, it's true, we have a biological necessity to feel understood. So in so many aspects of our lives, to feel understood is a basic biological, human, psychological, emotional component to exist. No matter where we are. And we know that from our own experiences, we know that empirically, we know that anecdotally, and we know that now more and more from science. And Colin, when you show that image of that young Syrian Kurdish boy, Alian Kurdi, I used that image and gave different presentations on the nature of empathy. Because what science tells us about empathy, it's contingent on context and proximity, that our brains can contextualize that experience in our own. In other words, we can understand it. And so there are many images like that one that appeared on the front page above the fold of major newspapers around the world.
Yeah.
And yet that one image resonated the most because nobody needed to filter our brains through it.
Right.
Our brains contacted, accessed that, contextualized it, and understood it. And that, to a large extent, is what science tells us is the basis of empathy.
Wow.
So the more we can contextualize, the more we recognize we need to feel understood. I think the more you don't have to maybe agree with the other side, but give them the concession, the symbolic concession, the real concession of saying, I understand how important this is to you. And that literally creates a cognitive shift in people's brains.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Tim.
That spirit of context, I want to end with a piece of music that I love very much. Sydney, will you play Reverend Siku and the Revolutionary Band? And by the way, I had the pleasure of dancing with Latifa and Colin until we fell down with the Revolutionary Band.
I was holding you.
And this is the song. The revolution is now.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow. It wasn't yesterday. So everyone, just listen to these words, and we'll talk again tomorrow night about Florida. We'll talk about Sydney will lead us.
What a time to be alive.
Take money out of pocket. The revolution has come. All right, everyone, dance. It's a time to be alive. The revolution is here.
It doesn't come out.
It doesn't. That's the technical problem. Beautiful night. We already won. We already won.
Hey,
We won.
great
Thank you,
program.
everyone. I love you all. We'll be all through the election. Until
Love
the
you.
Electoral College decides, we will be on the air. So join us. We'll,
Love you all. Thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much. It was wonderful program.
Thank you,
Thanks a
Tim.
lot. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you, everyone.
Tim, I hope we see you
Thank
soon.
you.
See you in Greece.
Yeah.
We'll see you in Greece.
Yeah, hope so.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Joanna.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Invite him. Invite Carl. I want to meet you guys because
Yes, this is the whole point. This is our new board meeting right now.
yes, yes.
Thank you, Sid and Patrick, too.
Sid and
Yes,
Patrick.
yeah, absolutely.
Over here.
Absolutely.
Patrick,
Thank you all.
hit the
Thank
bow.
you. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Bye, everyone. Love you all.
Everyone,
Thank you.
take care.
Thank you.
Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Show up again. We will do more work on love.
We love you, Artemis.
Love you, Tina. Mwah. Love
Love
you,
you all.
Brenda. Love you, Brian.
Thank you, everyone.
Jackie.
Thank you, Artemis.
Good night, everyone. Sleep well. Sleep knowing
you.
that we will win. We are winning. We have already won.
We already won.
Mwah. Thank you, everyone. Good night.